So the Conservatives love to talk about crime, and there is nothing more in their mind more vote winning than talking just about the police. But there is more, a lot more, to crime and justice than just the police. Because really, when you think about it, there are three pillars that hold up this entire, what we would call, the law and justice system in any real country. And that is, first of all, you've got the police and the enforcement of it. That's the real first pillar. The second one is, of course, the judicial system. This is where the judges come in. You have prosecution, defense, all you name it. That's really the second pillar of justice. The third one is the prisons, because that's where obviously the punishment part tends to come in. Obviously, there are different parts of punishment. We've talked about this before, that you don't just have to send someone to prison, and sometimes sending someone to prison can end them on the path, or start them on the path, as in some cases, to them essentially becoming repeat criminals. So there are better ways to punish people than just sending them to prison, or just sending them to prison for longer, which is what the Tories really seem to be on this massive bent for. And I urge you most definitely to go and follow The Secret Barrister. They have an absolutely fantastic blog, and they live and work, well, they probably do live and work, in our second pillar, and that is the judicial system. And they are themselves, they're a barrister. And they have put it this way: I have read their blogs and I follow them on Twitter, and I am shocked at just how bad this part of the system is. And the problem is, we are facing a system that is strong on these two pillars, but the second pillar in the middle is falling and crumbling to pieces. And in a society, in order to get justice and have a proper, good, functioning, justice system, all three pillars have to be supported. And unfortunately, really, since the Tories have come to power, they've really ignored the justice part of the system, or the judicial part of the system, and it is resulting in huge problems. And especially down the line, post-COVID, it's only going to get worse. So today we're going to go follow a piece from Dominic Grieve, which he did for The Guardian, and it's about his view on just what is going on of essentially our crumbling court system. So before we jump into that, please do remember to hit that like and share button. And of course, down below there is a link to my Patreon page, as well as a one-off donation link called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can, buy me a coffee. And thank you to all the people who do support me that way. So, like I said, this comes from The Guardian, and the title is, "I've seen how the justice system is crumbling. Why doesn't the government take action?" When I first stood at the bar in the early 1980s, my practice was largely publicly funded by legal aid, and much of it was crime and family work. I travelled across London and South East England representing clients in Crown, Country and Magistrate courts. Most of these buildings were Victorian and lacked the facilities to cope with the growing volume of criminal and civil cases. But there were signs of a change. At Maidstone, where I was a frequent visitor, the Queen came to open the new court centre. She spoke of how the profession of justice was essentially the first social service, provided by the state and the central to a coronation oath. The resident judge, John Streeter, had worked hard to get a building that could help deliver a more effective justice system. And there were many more courts, rooms for consultations with clients and bar messes, where apart from being able to buy hot food, it was able to get privacy and to get advice from colleagues and to resolve issues with one's opponent. A couple of years after it opened, visiting officers of the Lord Chancellor Department, we were holding it open as an example for the future, noting that it had a reputation for efficiency and high professional standards of delivery. When I was General Attorney from 2010 to 2014, I returned there on a visit to the Crown Prosecution Service and to see the judges. The contrast could have not been more greater. The building looked tired and poorly maintained. There were water leaks, facilities for advocates were largely gone, and with them much of the sense of purpose and camaraderie I remember. The judges were no better off. Most had brought their lunch in from plastic containers from home. While it must be right that cuts in services have to start with things that will be seen as professional comfort, the state of courts and others I have seen since, and the general state of morale among judges, court staff, barristers, solicitors carrying this out in these areas of work points to a major crisis in our justice system. This can also be seen in the prison service, with its overcrowding and its inability to deliver on effective rehabilitation regimes or control the spread of COVID. At the root, there are serious decisions made by successive governments, going back at least over the past 2 decades, either to hold back in the increases overjoyed by the other areas of public expenditure, or after the 2008 financial crisis, to the cut to the justice budget more deeply than anywhere else. In real terms, the reduction in spending overall between 2010 and 2019 has been over 25%. Given that, in that time, the population of England and Wales has risen by 7%, and the prison population largely remains over around 80,000. Any cuts to the criminal justice system were going to be hard to achieve, and in the run-up to the 2010 election, the then once Justice Secretary Jack Straw, who I shadowed, could see the looming crisis and facilitated better pre-election briefings from me and from the civil service they'd been done before, and they were very sobering. Yet at the time, much of the Conservative policy on prison reform and trying to decrease prisoner numbers was being diverted by the need to fight off a tabloid-inspired campaign to make us buy prison ships, or to cater for increased prison numbers for the resulting of tougher sentencing. This policy was plainly incapable of delivering value for money. I note that the new Police, Crime and Sentencing Courts Bill is about to pile even more pressure on prison numbers. After 2010, the largest percentage of cuts fell on legal aid, and the budget cuts for the CPS and the latter, which came under my remit as Attorney General, the CPS, and under Keir Starmer's leadership, responded very well in streamlining its operations and still maintaining conviction rates, helped by a number of unexpected downturn in the number of court trials. But all efficiencies have their limits. When in 2013 we successfully persuaded the Treasury to impose a far smaller cut than it had been demanding, it was obvious that if this were to continue, there would be huge problems. And as it became evident later, with complaints about falling conviction rates and collapsing cases. Yet, the worst consequences come from the treatment of the legal aid paid to advocates and solicitors for their work. This was reduced from by a total of almost $2.2 billion in 2010 to $1.7 billion by 2019. Despite trying to minimise the worst effects of these cuts and recent small budget increases, the blunt reality is that for most criminal and family-related work, the earnings are now so low that any lawyer would think twice about choosing these cases as a career option. I can think of no other professionals where the remuneration rates have been almost static for almost 30 years. I was pleased as an Attorney General to champion the pro bono unpaid work and schemes to deliver civil legal aid through law centres, but none of this can compensate for cutbacks. For the ordinary public who encounter the justice system, its growing inadequacies and delays and the injustice that can flow from them are real. Last month, the secret barrister spoke of a serious domestic violence case first reported by his client, the alleged victim, in 2017. In large part because of the cuts to the police, the CPS and the courts, and the exasperated by the pandemic. This case has still not been heard in court. In all this time, the defendant, an alleged violent, manipulative man, has remained free, and the complainant has been unable to move on with her life. It is sometimes suggested that the court of common law and justice system has become excessive by standards of civil Western democracies. But this is not supported by evidence. In 2016, the Netherlands was spending €689 or £585 per head on justice. Denmark, it was €358 compared with the just €150 here. Most of the justice secretaries I have known and have privately acknowledged that their department is systemically short of resources, but not because of the way the Treasury and the government operates, and the difficulty of showing financial effectiveness in an entirely demand-driven service with unpredictable fluctuations. Those secretaries have resorted at best to damage limitation, and at worst trying to curry favour by volunteering cuts. They are seen to be very few votes again for gains for a successful justice system. So I fear we are unlikely to see any significant changes, though it is urgently needed to maintain the foundations of a good civilised society. Far from being able to pride ourselves on our excellence for our justice system, it is in danger of turning into a wild sculpture that has been external appearances are being maintained, and few in government are noticing or even appear bothered. Meanwhile, we should stop being surprised at the increasing stories about the failings of the system, because the reasons are just obvious. So, as you can see, there is a massive part in our, and I agree with, with the, well, Dominic Grieve. I was going to call him Dominic Cummings then, but yeah, Dominic Grieve there, on that we have a massive, real, central problem that's something we need for society, and we aren't providing it, which is really, really worrying. Indeed, we are seeming to be cutting it even more. And just as that story stated there is a case from 2017 that still has not gone to court and has been pushed back even more because of the pandemic. That should be, I'm not going to lie, that should be plastered all over the front page news. And I think, again, as someone who is a Labour supporter and a Labour advocate, I think this would be a fantastic area to attack the Tories on, that they constantly crow about how wonderful the justice system should be, and how much the quote unquote they've done. But all you have to do is point to this area, and they've done nothing with it. In fact, since they've been in, it's only gotten worse. And you see the cases like that of one that was committed all the way back in 2017 and still in 2021 has not got to court yet. That should be plastered all over the front and should be the biggest brush that you can go and start hitting Priti Patel with over the head with, because that's ultimately at the moment who's responsible for this. The Home Secretary, she is partly responsible for this mess that we're in. But of course, at the moment, as many journalists are pointing out, we are not in or seeing conservatism, we are seeing Johnsonism. And that in itself is just about as more worrying than anything else, probably at this moment in time. But as always, thank you for watching. Please do remember to hit that like and share button. And of course, down below, there is a link to my Patreon page and one donation link as well called Buy Me a Coffee, where you can buy me a coffee. And thank you for all for watching, and we'll see you all next time.